Thanks, Cassidy. Good evening, everybody else. Enrolling your land into CRP. She gave a brief overview of what we're going to talk about, but we'll get into some of the practices and the different things that you might consider when you go into the office and wanting to enroll your land into the CRP program, or what areas you might be interested in doing that in. So let's get started. We're going to cover the Farm Service Agency is important information for CRP, things to think about when you're going into the office, or things that you might already have a little bit of idea of, but this might help, narrow down what you're wanting to do and things to do. We're going to go over general CRP, continuous CRP, the management you might have to do in that, and what to do next. Also SAFE programs and CRP programs, a little bit of information on that, so you can find what fits best for you and your operation. The background notes a little bit about CRP. The CRP, or Conservation Reserve Program, it's been around since 1985. It helps with soil, water, and wildlife. It's saved 8 billion tons of soil and provides a stable income for farmers, provides hunting opportunities that help the rural economies. So that might make your production, or more profitable, or maybe make your farm as good as it can get for you. CRP, with the Farm Bill program, we're saving about 1,730 metric tons of CO2 per year. It's equivalent to driving 2.5 million miles per year. And the CRP and cover crops we have attracted deer and pheasants and other wildlife. The payment rates are based off of your top 3 soil types, not the type of CRP you choose. So if you're going into that thinking you have one in mind, you are going to have your top 3 soil types. So that's just something that you might want to consider. We can tell your estimated payment rates in the office, so when you get in there, we can square you away for that. CRP eligibility. So with this farm bill, cropping history reported to the FSA 4 out of the 6 years from 2012 to 2017. So the cropping history for that, you'll want to have that information. Rotational or grain crops only, so corn and soybean operations. Marginal pasture lands is only eligible for select practices, filter strips, and riparian buffers. We'll get a little bit more into that later on in the slides. Producers must have owned or operated the land for at least 12 months prior to the CRP offer. So if you're newly acquired the land, or you have information about that, there's things that we can get taken care of for you. NRCS will complete a suitability and feasibility worksheet to make sure that the practice will meet your resource concerns. Start thinking about opportunities. Some of the people who have operations probably already know your lower yield areas, or areas that you might want to have this in there. So that's something you might want to consider. Over on the average, regardless of location, 20% of the farm loses money and 20% of the farm breaks even. And then that leaves the 60% of the farm that turns the total profit. What are your farm goals? Money, conservation, recreation, or your legacy? This CRP sign up or other conservation programs can help meet your goals and make ends meet. Other things to think about, what you already have, buffers along timber and waterway that you might have, wetlands, CRP in the spots, pollinators, CRP that is small flat plots, or where you want to do what, other options like that. And now I'm going to pass it over to Preston, and he's going to get into general CRP sign up.
All right. Thanks for the overview there, Zach. We're going to talk a little bit about sign up 64. This is for the general sign up. This is for more so your whole field operations, larger tracks that have a little bit more slope on them. But that doesn't mean you can't qualify if you're up in the north and the flat areas. So we'll go ahead and talk about the general sign up here. It runs from May 12th to June 6th of this year. Next, Zach. Some things that make general CRP unique. Most years it's different because it's competitive, and it's based off your EBI scores, which we'll go into what makes your EBI score. Most years general sign up is a closed window, and continuous is, as it states, continuous. However, this year with the limited funding, both signups are running at the same time. You can sign up for a 10-year contract or a 15-year contract. And with general, there are no incentive payments, whereas with continuous, you'll get some sign-up incentive payments. All right, we'll go through some of the practices that are offered through general. These are the most common. There may be a few more that we don't talk about, but these are the ones that we see the most. CP1, cool season grasses. This will be the one that the office will try to get you into if you go into the office and say, I just want to sign up for CRP. If you go into the office and say, I want CRP, more than likely they're going to sign you up for CP1. This is cool season, non-native grasses that are quick establish and do more good for holding soil, less good for wildlife value. CP2 is our native warm season grass plantings. Can add diversity by adding more forbs. This is the one for all you people that are wanting to do wildlife plantings on your property. The CP2s, you can go your tall grasses with your switchgrass, your Indian grass, your big blue stem, or you can go your short grasses with little blue stem, side oats, gamma, those types of things. CP3 and CP3A. CP3 is your pine plantings. More commonly used is your upland hardwood tree planting, CP3A. My personal favorite, CP4D, is permanent wildlife habitat. This allows you to really create your own personal playground. If you've got a big area that you're like, I'm done with farming, I want to make this into a wildlife mecca, work with one of our Farm Bill biologists, and that's the route to go. And then, the FSA calls it their Starship program or flagship practice. CP42 is pollinator habitat. This is good for everything. It's good for wildlife. It's good for your pollinators. It's good for even your croplands. Having a little bit of this next to your big crop areas is huge for your farmers, and a lot of them don't even realize how good it is. And then CP12 is just your food plot. It can be added as a incentive practice, added on to any of those at a 10% rate or 5 acres max. So if you have 50-acre field that you're enrolling, you can have 5 acres into it. If you have a 60-acre field, you can still only have 5 acres into it. So those are the practices, and we'll go over a little bit more in detail as we go through here. Go ahead, Zach. Oh, I thought I had this differently. So back to the EBI. EBI is the ranking tool for general contracts. FSA has a system that comes up with a number that your property scores. It's a point score assigned to each offer based on environmental benefits and cost. We don't know what the score takes to be accepted. It's different every year. This year, with the limited amount of acres, I'm sure it'll be even more highly competitive than normal. Each offer is analyzed and accepted based on the national rankings. Again, we don't know that until FSA runs those numbers. So what is the EBI factors? These are factors that you influence when you sign up for your CRP. You'll have the N1 factor, which is the wildlife factor, N4, which is enduring benefits factor, whether you can continue that CRP or habitat long after your contract ends. Your N5, which is your air quality benefits, and your N6, which is costs. And then your N4, N5, and 6 are all based off of your wildlife factor, which is a big choice of what you have when you go in to sign up for your CRP. Your EBI N1, the wildlife factor. It's broken up into A, B, C categories. As you can see at the bottom there, that's the formula for N1. Your wildlife habitat cover ranges from 10 to 50 points. Your wildlife enhancement, whether you end up doing added a food plot or add a pollinator to your cover, that can add 5 or 20 points. And then your wildlife priority zones, if you fall in one of those I know it's a little bit small to see, but if you fall in one of those green zones, you get bonus points depending on exactly where you fall at in each one of those. The blue is a waterway zone, and then the darker green is kind of where those two overlap. Again, it can range anywhere from 0 to 30 points on that. But if you fall into those green areas, those are areas that the state calls their priority areas, areas that they really think CRP can really benefit the land and the wildlife around. So if we go into our N1, you get to pick what type of cover you get. If you go into CP1, your cool season grasses and legumes, you can have a 10-point or a 40-point mix. If you go just a straight brome mix up north, you're going to end up with a 10-point mix. If you end up going with brome, bluegrass, clovers, and alfalfas, that type of stuff, you'll get a 40-point mix. CP2s, if you pick one grass and a couple forbs, you'll get 20 points. If you pick 3 grasses and 3 forbs at minimum, you'll get a 50-point mix. If you work with your Farm Bill Biologist, we can make it even more diverse, but your minimum and maximum is 20 to 50 points. Your CP3, 3As, your tree plantings, again, the more diverse your species selection is on that, the more points. I believe just a CP3 is the lowest points you can sign up for, where your 3A is the highest. So, always be thinking about what type of CRP you want to get into. It's not just CRP. There's a whole lot more behind it. As we go on, CP4D, again, that was my favorite. It's 40 to 50 points. If you go with 1 or 2 types of shrubs and 1 type of grass, you're probably going to be with a 40-point mix, where if you go with 4 or 5 different types of shrubs and 4 or 5 different types of grasses and forbs, you're going to get that 50 points for that N1A. And then CP42 is just a straight 50 points right across. So, and that's, your CP42 50 points is only for if you enroll CP42 straight across, not for your incentive or your incentive addition. So with your wildlife habitat or enhancement, like I just said, you can add pollinator plots to your planting. So if you have 10 acres and you're looking to plant CP2 and you're going to do a diverse mix, we can get you 50 points with that. And then on top of that, if you want to add a pollinator plot, 1 acre, you can get 20 points on top of that. So you'll have 70 points right there. If you still want to do a additional food plot, you still only get the 20 points, but it does increase your amount of diversity you can get on your score. All right. Into the types of practices that we can pick from for those EBI N1 scores. Your CP1 are your cool season grasses, your non-native, your fescues, your bromes, your bluegrasses, those types of grasses that establish quickly, have a relatively low wildlife value, grow pretty thick and dense. These plantings often require soil samples and fertilizer, and usually you have to work up the ground to get them seeded. It's kind of it's CP1. It's the first CP that there is in the CRP practices. It's probably the most common across the state, probably across the nation. Most of the time, the picture on the right side of the screen there, that's what these types of plants or these plantings look like in the fall, due to the fact that most of our farmers decide that or have made the assumption that August 1st is the date that everybody has to start mowing. That is a false assumption. If you've ever heard somebody say, it's August 1st, got to mow my CRP, that is false. We no longer require mowing each year. It's more of an aesthetic thing or a recreational mowing syndrome that everybody thinks it's got to look clean. It's got to look good. The mowing actually does nothing but hurt the wildlife on your property. I made the analogy a couple days ago to a farmer. Think about these tornadoes that we've had down south. come November, tornado comes through, wipes out your habitat where you've been living all year. That's a bush hog coming through right before it gets cold and nasty when you're trying to hunker in. So think about that when you're pulling out the mowers to mow. Make sure you have a reason behind it. Generally, your mid-contract management that you'll choose is interseeding, or we'll interseed some forbs mid-contract. CP2, native warm season grasses. Again, it's a diverse native warm season grass and forb planting. Has high wildlife value, requires no fertilizer or soil tests, can be broadcast on frozen ground or no-tilled. So very easy, light equipment. Most everybody can get their hands on a broadcast seeder to be able to broadcast these types of plantings out on the frozen ground that we get in the cold winters of Illinois. Additionally to your pollinator plot or your food plot, you can add clover burn lines around the outside that increase your diversity one more step, that can act as a food plot, that can act as a travel corridor. But again, they're there to help you maintain and manage your planting for the future. Your mid-contract managements that are best suited for these types of plantings are your prescribed burning, your interseeding, and your strip disking. I would highly recommend to utilize the burning mid-contract management. You'll get a free burn plan written by the office staff, or most likely one of our Farm Bill Biologist staff. We'll walk you through the steps, and if you have more questions, we do have northern and southern prescribed fire coordinators that are working to try to coordinate trainings and local workshops for you folks to learn more about burning and getting fire on the ground safely. Other options are interseeding and or strip disking or spraying. CP3A, I'm just going to talk about 3A. I'm not as familiar with 3s. Your upland hardwood tree plantings. Generally, a forestry planting plan is developed by a forester that works with you as the landowner to pick suitable species for the site. Most of the time, it's going to be 4 to 5 different species on the site. Oaks, hickories, walnuts. If you end up in a little bit lower areas, we can mix some cypress into those. Generally, they're planted in 10 by 10 spacings, and these are high maintenance practices. Tree plantings, for the longest time, everybody just thought, oh, I'm just going to plant my trees and walk away. They come back 10 years later, and it's solid. Multiflora rose, autumn olive, bush honeysuckle, Japanese honeysuckle, etc. For the first 10 years of this contract, it's going to be, you got to mow your rows, you got to prune your trees. It's highly intensive. But if you're wanting to switch that back over to a wooded system, that's probably the best bet practice for you. These are, again, 15-year contracts, and they are limited to 1 re-enrollment. Meaning that the life of the contract can only be, or the life of the planting can only last 30 years. And again, your mid-contract management is usually pruning or thinning, depending on whether you're in your first contract or your second contract. All right, permanent or CP40 permanent wildlife habitat. Again, this is what I had mentioned that is my favorite, is becoming many of our Farm Bill Biologists' favorite practice. It combines the native grass plantings with a tree or shrub plantings at a 5% minimum on shrubs, and or you can do a tree planting with a 5% minimum of grasses. Again, you can have that 10% minimum of food plot, or 10% maximum of food plots. We can put a pollinator plot in there. These are as customizable as possible, or as you want to make it. The examples here on the pictures are some landowners I worked with down here in Perry County. You can see my nice square drawing that I could draw with my mapping system versus what the landowner actually wanted to do. Ultimately it got the job done. The acres were all the same, but the areas that are mowed out are clover rows with shrub rows that are acting as corridors, and then the 8/snowman looking figure in the middle is actually a bean plot. And this producer actually called me last year from the deer stand and said, I'm watching 60 plus deer stand in my food plot right now. And he goes, I don't know where they came from. They just appeared, which that tells you that the grass plantings all around are working. They're doing their job to hold those deer. They've also seen a big uptick of turkeys on their property and had their first covey of quail sighting this past spring. So awesome success story there. The old adage of you build it, they will come. CP4D, if you have a big area like that that's hard for a farmer to get all the way back into, that's your practice. Again, come talk to one of your local Farm Bill biologists, and we'll get a wildlife plan written for you. It's kind of a 10-year plan of how to plan it, maintain it, manage it throughout the life of its contract. So, and then the mid-contract management, if you do a tree or shrub planting, you're probably going to end up doing some pruning on those acres, while your grasses are going to be your burning acres. All right, your CP42, your pollinator habitat, is a very, very common one that we're seeing more and more of, which is awesome. Your pollinators are not only beneficial to the wildlife, they're beneficial to migratory birds, to our state insect, the monarch butterfly, and even to your neighboring farmed acres. It brings all those good insects in and pushes those bad insects out, limiting the amount of insecticides that may be needed to use in the area. Pollinators can also be signed up in continuous CRP if the area is less than 10% of your total farm acres or less than 10 acres, whichever one is smaller. Again, that is your farm acres, not your tract acres. So if you have 4 or 5 different tracts that tally up, you can find those little odd spots to put your CP42 in through continuous. Just another thing, your wildlife food plots, again, it's limited to 10% or 5 acres of the field. That's kind of a big point there. 10% or 5 acres of the field. So if you have 3 fields that you're enrolling into CRP, you can only get 10% of that field. So can be green perennials or grain plots, and the FSA does not cost share on planting those, and they need to be maintained each year. So back into the EBI. Now that we've picked what we want to do, we've got our N1. We're going to look at some other factors here. Our N4 is the likelihood that certain practices remain beyond the CRP contract. You'll excuse me, as you would assume, you'll get more points for trees, less points for pollinator, and no points for other types. The thought is that once you plant trees and you've done all the work to maintain those trees, you're more likely to just let those trees grow up rather than bring a bulldozer in and flatten it back out and farm it. Your N5 is your carbon sequestration. Again, your tree plantings that are going to pull more carbon emissions are going to be higher ratings, whereas your primary grass complexes that are again going to pull more of your carbon is going to be a little bit less, and so on, all the way down to your CP12s that are 0, because you're probably going to plant those every year and not do a whole lot. Your EBI cost. This is one that can make or break your sign up, whether you get in or not. Some farmers have had really good luck with taking reduced payments. You can take a reduced payment up to 15% reduction for a maximum of 25 points additional to your EBI score. And then costs are determined after the sign up. Once the sign up is complete, they will figure out where your costs may be more or less than others. Again, your tree plantings are probably going to be more costly than your grass plantings. So again, your EBI score will balance out here with carbon sequestration on the cost for your N6. These are just some examples of, different diversity where habitats. This is up north. This is just a solid brome stand, probably a CP1. You would get 10 N1 points for this type of cover. Versus this, which is our more diverse CP2 and CP42. You would get 50 points for this type of mix. That's going to be a lot better for wildlife, a lot better for everything else that uses it. Just better all around. So you get more points. That kind of wraps up how we add up or how the FSA adds up their EBI scores and what we as producers can control when we sign up. These types of practices are great for larger portions or whole fields. It's awesome if you can add more diverse mixes into your enrollments, add food plots or pollinators to increase your score, and always be thinking about what your goals are. If your goals are to have a hunting farm, your farm is for strictly hunting, and you're wanting to max out your wildlife capabilities. Maybe this general route's for you. I know that Brody's going to talk a little bit more about CP38 safe acres, which will allow for a little bit easier access to these larger types of practices. But if you have the erodibility and the EBI scores, you'll qualify for general, no problem. General's pretty straightforward. Pick your practice, you add your enhancements, you pick your seeding mix, and then your mid-contract. FSA is going to calculate those EBI and soil rates, and they'll get back to you on what your soil rental rate comes out to be and whether your EBI ranks up high enough, and they will get back to you whether you've qualified for general. If you do not qualify for general, there is the option of safe if you have more than 10 acres. It may be an easier route to get into the CRP. And I'm going to turn it back over to Zach for continuous.
Thanks, Preston. Yeah, with the general, there's a lot going into that. So like Preston said, reach out to your Farm Bill biologists, or when you talk to your offices, they'll give you a better idea. So make sure you reach out to the proper people and try to steer you in the right direction for that. I'll be going into continuous sign up for the continuous practices. Environmentally desirable land devoted to certain conservation practices may be enrolled in potentially 3 batching periods. Offers are not subjected to competitive bidding, but may be limited to acres. So this one's a little bit different, like we were saying, since the window's a little bit smaller and they're going in the same batching period. So if there's acres extra left over that aren't in the allotted ones right now, there's potentially other, but as of right now, June 6th, you'll want to have both of those or any options in there. So let's dig into some of the continuous practices. So continuous CRP practices are available to specifically address soil, water, and wildlife resource concerns. So that's when I was saying earlier about going out to the suitability and feasibility determination by someone who comes out and does that to your land just to see what you're kind of working with and what the major resource concerns are and how we can address those properly. Sign up done in this batch is May 12th through June 6th. Second batching period, like I said, if the acres allow. Hopefully we get a bunch of people in and have those practices all taken so we can use up as many acres as we can and put in good habitat or whatever stands that you want out there on the ground for you. These may offer some incentive programs with CRP continuous, so that's something you might look out for. And like the general, they're 10 to 15 year contracts. So that's something that you're going to be wanting to know is how long these periods that can be in there. So 10 to 15 years for continuous. Some of the common practices that we see that we use, there's other ones, but these are the ones that we're kind of going to dig into for the continuous CRP for what we're going into today. CP9 is a shallow water area for wildlife. CP21 are your filter strips that you might need or you might be looking at or interested in. CP23A is wetland restoration, but that's in the non-floodplain. So if you're not in the floodplain, CP23A would be the route that you're wanting to kind of dig into and look for. On the contrary of the CP23 for the wetland restoration, that's in the 100-year floodplain. So that's just the difference there between the 23A and the 23. So if you're in the floodplain, you know it already, or you might not know it if you're just acquiring within at least a year ago for the floodplain, but you can figure all that information out at your office. CP31 is a bottomland hardwood tree planting. So that's something that you'll want to put in. It'll be all your hardwoods, whether that's oaks, hickories, or different things of that nature. You'd probably want those pretty diverse too, just so that you could have a good stand. Your CP33 is a habitat buffer for upland birds. CP42 is a pollinator habitat. So like Preston said, that's the flagship where the pollinator habitat is really diverse and has a lot of different forbs and native grasses in there for you. CP43 is prairie strip, and we'll get into those. And then CP38, pheasant and quail safe practices that Brody will touch on here in a little bit. So let's get into CP9, shallow water area for wildlife. You probably know your areas that tend to stay wet throughout the majority of the year, if not all the year. So you kind of have an already idea of that. It's less than or equal to 10 acres in size. 20 to 120 foot grass buffer requirement for these. And then it'll be about 6 to 18-inch average water depth throughout your watered area. So it's pretty shallow still. It doesn't get too deep. So that's 6 to 18 inches your average depth. Requires engineered dirt work. So there's a couple more steps in there with the engineer to come out and move the dirt. Not saying it's not accessible or finding the people that can do that, but it does require engineered dirt work. Your CP21, install a grass buffer along streams, ditches, and rivers. You can see here where this piece of equipment has kind of dug into the water area and didn't have that, filter strip in there, so it's running off. These are 30 feet to 120 feet wide. This is to remove nutrients, sediments, organic matter, and pesticides and other pollutants from the surface water runoff and the subsurface flow. So filter strips are also provide great wildlife habitat when planted to native grasses and wildflowers. So you'll have a nice little strip to be able to be in there. And if you do have them in native grasses and forbs, it is a nice little corridor and place for your wildlife habitat. You see here in the pictures, you can kind of see where it's starting to go in there and you're planting pretty much right up to the edge of your runoff area. So a lot of that nutrients and everything's running right into that and running right off. So you don't really get to hold that nutrients and sediment in there from the surface water and the subsurface flow. So that's one place that you might be looking for. If this kind of looks like your farm or your property, you could kind of see where it starts to completely run off. And those areas are probably not the most high yielding areas, and you see that on your when you guys go and actually farm and get your yields back. But that's an area that you might look for to add one of those. Here's another example from an aerial map of what you're kind of looking at, and you see the same picture as the farm behind that picture, where you can kind of see it's starting to go off. You don't really have much production in those areas, so that's a place that you might want to keep in mind for that. And this is what the filter strip would add to it and kind of look like afterwards. So you do have on each side that good buffer or that good filter strip to be able to filter that sediment and that runoff for you so you can hold your nutrients in the parts of your profitable parts of your farm. Here's a good picture of what it would look like if you're planting any of those native habitats for that. So you'll have that little corridor or in between where your row crop starts and where it ends into the native habitat to go down into that, so that you have that little bit of a filter strip to stop that runoff into that watered area, streams or creeks that it would go to. CP23A, a wetland restoration. Again, this is in the non-floodplain, so that you'd be able to know if you're in the flood or non-floodplain. The offered area must contain at least 50% hydric soil, and we can determine that in your soil types. When you come into the office, we'll be able to determine that, or FSA or NRCS, they would be able to determine that. It's up to 4-to-1 ratio upland habitat versus the wetland. So around that, you would have some upland habitat, so that would be able to be there for that little bit of upland habitat versus when you're in the wetland area. It does not require earth moving, so you would not have to have an engineer come and do dirt work and things like that in there. So that's something that you might think about if you don't have equipment or you're wanting to not have it too much of a disturbance, that there's no earth moving required. Food plots and tree/shrub plantings are allowed in there. So that's another thing that you might be looking for too, if you're trying to, make it a little more diverse and encompass everything of what you're trying to attract there and what you're trying to keep. The food plots are allowed. Here's an aerial picture of kind of what that looks like. You see that there's some habitat in there and there's some stuff around those areas, but there is the pockets of wetland in there, and it's not in the 100-year floodplain, although it does still flood. This is kind of what your map might look like if you have your farm map now of what you're interested in, or that might look like one of your guys' farms, to try to see if that's what's suited for you and your property. Here's what it would look like after the practice. So you do see that wildlife habitat around it, and then you have your acres of the wetland in there. So that 4-to-1, that's what you'd be looking for in there of upland habitat versus the actually wetland of yourself, as well as kind of squares off your field. Now the floodplain, the 23, is a wetland restoration. So you can kind of see in the picture what that might look like. Offered area must contain at least 50% hydric soil. Like I stated, we can determine your soil types. So if you come in, we can do that. This one's a 3-to-1 ratio of upland habitat and wetlands versus the 23A, which is a 4-to-1. Does not require earth moving, but must be located within the 100-year floodplain. So like the last one, the 23A, it does not require the earth moving, but it does have to fall in that 100-year floodplain. And stated before, the food plots and tree and shrub plantings are allowed for this one as well. Here's what you kind of got going on there. You see the habitat and then you see it, but it is in the 100-year floodplain. So you see that creek or river going kind of through there, and it stays wet throughout there from being in the floodplain. Here's another aerial of what your map might look like before you add the practice. And now here's what it would look like after the practice. So you could have your non-crop land, but into your buffers, and then your actual wetland, as well as squaring off your field. CP33, it's a habitat buffer or for upland birds. So it's perfect for upland birds and marginalizing your outer row crop. So it kind of has that a little bit of around the field. So you can put that into native grasses and forbs. It is a 30 to 120 foot average width along one or all sides of your fields, but it must border cropland. So that's where it kind of goes in there to in between your trees and into your actual more profitable soil and your profitable yields off of your row crops. So that kind of gives you that little bit of buffer in between there that you can have some grasses, and you might not have the most profitable yields off those rows closer to or almost on the tree line. So that would be a good way to kind of look at it. It can also include pivot corners, and the fields must be at least 5 acres inside. So if you're looking to plant that, your seed costs could range from 80 to 150 an acre. Depends on your diversity and what kind of planting you want to put into those. If you obviously call up to your Farm Bill biologist, we can have a mix that you could add more into it, native forbs and grasses to meet a little bit more. That might be a little bit more on the higher 150 end, or if you're just meeting the requirements of what it has to be for your forbs and native grasses, that'd be probably on your lower end of the seed cost. Here's a picture of some areas that might be a pivot corner or things like that, where you could kind of see where it's not very profitable back there, but you want to add a little bit of upland habitat in there for that. Here's the CP33, Mississippi State University study from 2006 in the states that are listed above. They came up with the breeding season bobwhite density were more than 70% greater on a CP33 fields than controlled fields. So that definitely increases your broods and things like that of your upland birds. So they definitely use those, and the studies have shown that they increase significantly. The fall bobwhite covey densities were 50%, 70%, and 110% greater on CP33 fields than controlled fields. So this is great for your upland birds. Also, it used deer and other wildlife in there will use those. So it's just a big bonus for all the wildlife habitat in there, as well as can kind of square off your fields or, get your lower yield areas out of there. So that's definitely something to consider with the CP33, as well as Iowa State University, IDNR, the Midwest Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, and Pheasants Forever did a study in 2018 for the CP33 habitats. And they stated that pheasants select landscapes with a mix of cropland, grassland cover types, with the waste of grain used as a primary food source and herbaceous cover used to raise young and avoid predators. So that's where they can pop out, get food from the leftover crop that's laying on there that you didn't quite get. And then they could pop back in there for cover and shelter from predation. It's great so that you can pop out, get your food, and pop back in. Everything is like convenience for humans as well, where if you can go eat and you can get back to shelter and quickly and be able to escape things, that's something that you want to get into. But pheasant densities increased in a mixed cropland grassland landscape as the proportion of the grassland increases to a maximum of approximately 35 to 50%, with the cropland making up most of the remainder. So this is a great if you have that little buffer around your fields, as long as it's one to all of the sides of the fields, this would be something that you might want to look into. Your CP42, your pollinators, this is a great for small fields or odd areas and upland wildlife. But as Preston stated, it helps with way more than just your wildlife, your insects, the monarch butterflies, and kind of just an overall great for all. It would be a pollinator. It's a minimum of a half acre for this. So that's an area you want to look at. And now it's 10 acres or 10% of your cropland acres are the cap for that. So whichever's lesser in that situation for you or for your property, that's something that you might want to consider. Approximately the cost seed could be 135 to 165. As I stated before, the more diverse you get, the more it might be cost-wise for those, but generally they're around 135 to 165 dollars for that per acre. Pollinator habitat is upland habitat and benefits all types of wildlife: deer, turkey, pheasant, quail, non-game birds, and many more, as well as it's aesthetically pleasing to look out when they're all in bloom. Things are starting to bloom now, your spiderworts and things like that, your penstemons, they're starting to go now. So it's a beautiful all year round. There's early, mid, and late blooming. So you'll have nice, vibrant colors throughout, as well as helping all the wildlife and insects and things like that. So 42 is a great, if you have some small odd areas or different things like that for upland wildlife, as well as many other things. Your CP 43 is a prairie strip, so it's native herbaceous vegetation strips. You see here in the picture to the right next to the crop fields, it's being able to put those in native stands and have a little corridor as we said, 30 feet to 120 feet wide. It cannot exceed 25% of your cropland area. So that's where it's a prairie strip. So it won't be exceeding any of that. And can be placed around the perimeter of a field or through a field, parallel or perpendicular to grass waterways. Here's a photo of a nice prairie strip, courtesy of Iowa State University. And they published a study stating that 10% of the farm, putting 10% of the farm into prairie strips reduces soil loss by 95%, your nitrates by 72%, your phosphorus by 77%, and your total N by 70%. A 10% reduction in the field size to be placed into habitat can lead to a 5 to 30% yield increase in soybeans, as well as a 40% increase in achieved with interseed if you interseed with buckwheat. So that's a great practice to have if you're having little areas like this that you want to put into native habitat. It's only going to benefit you and the wildlife. If you can, even at the 5% yield increase, you're still increasing in that yield. And if you can get up to 30% yield increase, great. That's just going to benefit you and your farm and make it more profitable for you. As well as I said, it looks amazing and you're able to do what you need with it. Central Illinois. So here's a prairie strip that was done up here in Central Illinois, more in my area of coverage. So in the soil it caught on the strip after a heavy rain, you can kind of see that it kind of stops and keeps that there. And then it's a 5 to 20% yield increase in the soybeans is what this Central Illinois farm. So to see that and holding it where it needs to be, it's doing its job and making your land more profitable. So in a sense, it's a win for all. So that way that you guys can continue to do your farming operation and making it as profitable as you possibly can while still putting it into a practice. Odd areas. So that's some things that you might want to look for. A lot of you probably already know those odd areas or your lower yielding areas, like I stated. So that's something just to consider, or that you already know and you're just trying to figure out which practice is best for you. But those difficult areas to access, your overlapping rows, your less productive areas, or may have wildlife damages. So that's just things to consider when going into these practices. I will show you here. Here's a aerial of a farm where it kind of looks not so square. You're kind of trying to find areas that are hard to get into, your big pieces of equipment that just might not fit your operation and your farming operation as well as you would like it to. So by adding some of these practices here, you can see that those areas that are hard to access, you can put those into some of these practices and not have to get in there and still remain profitable and make sure that your farming operations are as successful as you can while still benefiting the wildlife habitat and the farm itself. Those light green areas in there would be areas that you might want to square off or try not to get into. So by planting one of these practices, it would be a perfect fit for you to make sure that you guys can still be profitable, but as well as make it easier on yourself and less work. Squaring up fields, it could reduce your fuel consumption, less wear and tear on your equipment, and then you spend less time in the field and make fewer turns. So these are things that you might think about, it just takes me forever to get in there. It's hard on the equipment. I'd rather say I'd rather put it into a practice and not have to deal with that and save some of the fuel costs and try to make sure that you can keep your equipment as long as you can without beating it up and making sure that you can have your field's nice and square so that it makes it easier in time so you can stay out of the field as long as you or as much as you can stay out of the field so you don't have to be out there. These might be an interest for you. Here's a picture of an aerial that I was kind of stating. So if you wanted to square up your field so that it's easier for you to be able to have your equipment just go through there and not have to worry about trying to maneuver around that or get down into areas that you are. By adding a practice here, you square up your fields in that light green. You could have a practice where it has that buffer in between there where there's still good wildlife habitat and native plantings so that you can attract many different species and things like that, as well as square up your field. So it just makes your farming operation a little bit easier on you and a little less wear and tear. So that way it might make more sense in the long run to put it into one of these practices so that it helps you out. I'm going to pass it over now to Brody, and he's going to dig a little bit into SAFE and the management practices of these.
Thank you, Zach. When we're talking about SAFE is kind of a middle ground practice, or it's more of a category than it is a practice. It brings a lot of the general practices, the whole field practices that Preston was talking about earlier, and allows those to be accessed in the continuous sign-up period. It was originally brought along in small areas, usually small townships or sections within townships, to assess specific endangered or threatened species. And that's since been expanded a couple years ago now to the entire state of Illinois, broken up into two zones, the Illinois Pheasant Safe Initiative into the northeastern portion of Illinois, covering all of central Illinois, and the Illinois Quail Safe Initiative, which is western and southern Illinois. To be able to sign up for CP 38 Safe, you have to have a minimum of 10 acres. 10 acres that used to be worded as contiguous, but now it can be 10 acres as long as the multiple fields that you have is within 75 yards of each other. And the reasoning behind that is just so that won't impede wildlife very much to go that distance. So as long as they're that close and you have a total of 10 acres together, that is considered contiguous. Quail Safe, the western and southern Illinois region, it has a restriction where that is to be only native short grasses. And so as opposed to the pheasant safe area where you could have tall native grasses or short native grasses in the quail area, it is preferred and it is only allowed that you can have short native grasses. So no big blue stem Indian grass or switchgrass. All safe practices have to be native practices, and they are to be managed at least 1 out of every 4 years. Also, wind turbines are not authorized on safe acres as to not disrupt the habitat that we're trying to cultivate in those sensitive areas. As for practices that you can do with SAFE, there's quite a few. Like I said, they're all native practices, so they'll be the most beneficial and diverse for different types of wildlife and invertebrates and pollinator species. There are native buffers, so CP 33 and 43, as Zach already talked about in the continuous sign-up. Wetlands, CP 9 and CP 23A. And the CP9 may only be used in the pheasant safe area, so the central and northeastern Illinois. And then other whole field practices, CP2, CP40, and CP25. Food plots you can use with SAFE, and they can only be in conjunction with CP2 and CP4D, though, but you can have a food plot component with those, so you can plan your hunting farm accordingly. There's another type of sign up that is called Highly Erodible Lands Initiative, or HELI, as it's often called, HELI, which is for those highly steep farms. You have to have an EI score, an EBI score of 20 or greater to qualify. And it's usually for general practices like CP1 or CP2. These are just, you can't have food plots on these. It's basically just to keep the soil from eroding in these highly soil sensitive areas with large slopes. They do have higher rental rates, and they also use double seeding, so that way if you use a standard seeding on something like that, it might not have enough to germinate and you might lose seed with any additional rain. So they plan for a double seeding. So you're allowed to, or you have more of an opportunity for those seeds to germinate and take root. Precision agriculture. These are specific practices that you can, or more strategies that you can use to be able to increase yield and increase productivity on your farm. We have a precision ag specialist in Illinois, Dallas Glazik. He is over in Paxton, Illinois, and his job is specifically tailored to this. But you could talk to him, or you could talk to any of the Farm Bill Biologist staff about how to utilize these practices on your farm. But these precision agricultural practices are for wet areas, or if they're near tree lines, compacted soils, or odd small areas. It's more for like Zach was just saying about squaring up fields and taking out those low yield areas where you're not raising crop and not raising money off of when you're losing money. So it's helping to install CRP in those more red areas to be able to raise your total bottom line up. So here's an example of how you could use a CP33 field border, the upland bird field border, to be able to utilize that in a way that serves as precision agriculture. If you look at this map on the left here, you can see all the red areas close to the shade. Obviously, they're not getting the sunlight, and they're also probably getting some leaching from the trees, as well as there might be some slope issues there. And you can also see the average yield is about 174 bushels per acre. So your profit is about $137 per acre. However, if you were to install a 30 to 120 foot field border on the southern portion of that field and take up all those red acres, you can actually bump up your bottom line, and your total average yield will actually raise too, because you're taking out those low productivity areas. And you'll have this particular farm had an average yield of 187 bushels per acre. And so that raised his profit to $151 an acre. So he raised his return on investment by about 10%. Here's another example. And this one is a farm that had a lot of issues. It was in the east central part of the state that they installed a bunch of wetland practices on, and also I believe they installed some other prairie strip practices in those red areas, and they were able to take up a lot of those low yield areas. And actually, with installing CRP on those areas where they were losing money, so they knew they would at least get the soil rental rate for those acres, it actually increased their profits by $6,400 a year. And this farmer that profited about $19,000 to $32,000 in that time that he would have been paying off any tile to get rid of those wetlands. By embracing those wetlands, it actually saved him money in the long run as well, and for the future as well. Here's another one as well. So on the eastern portion, there was a lot of by installing CRP on that eastern portion there, where you see a lot of low productivity soils. This same farmer was able to raise his total bushels per acre by about 20 to 25 bushels per acre, which raises profits above about $30 an acre. So by establishing this one was a non-floodplain wetland, a 23A in this area, his investment went up by almost 5%. So these are all great examples of how you can use CRP in your low productivity areas to be able to improve the overall bottom line of your farm, save you money, and make you more money in the future. Contract management for all contracts. So all CRP contracts are required to have a mid-contract management period. It's usually through years 4 to 6 on traditional 10-year contracts. And there's I believe the next slide has a bunch of various different types of management opportunities that you can use. And they're typically completed over a 3-year period. So when you have a total acreage, it would split those acreage into thirds over that 3-year period. And mid-contract management used to be able to have cost share and it would pay you for some of the work you did, but that is no longer the case. And some practices give you a 10% practice incentive payment up front in lieu of that. So yeah, you'll have contract management for all CRP practices except for a select few, I believe, CP 43s and 22s. Contract management. So these are the different types of management activities you can do. There is a prescribed fire, as Preston was talking about earlier, which you get a free burn plan. And you can actually, on some practices like CP 40 or 4Ds, you can have fire breaks already installed in some of those. So you can use prescribed fire. You can do interseeding, which is very common for especially a lot of cool season practices, but it helps rejuvenate older CRP seedings and also just helps get, if you had a lower quality seeding, helps getting more seed in there as well for especially a lot of those forbs. Strip disking is available. We don't typically prefer strip disking just because you can have a weed flush, and it's actually not allowed anymore on CP 42s. You can also do strip spraying if you have a super dense CRP or super dense, especially native grasses. Sometimes you can kick those back with a little bit of herbicide. And they'll do strip spraying, which is spraying in passes that would roughly be a third a pass apart. So you would skip 2 passes and then hit the next one to be able to do the same thing in the next 3 years as well. And then there's also prescribed grazing, which is you can have a plan to be able to prescribe graze your CRP, which is actually very beneficial to a lot of the native practices. Should I go with continuous or general CRP? That's a good question. A lot of times the FSA or our Farm Bill Biologist staff will be able to help you with that. But good rules of thumb is if you're looking into continuous, if you have hydric soils, if you're looking at buffers, filter strips, or whole field practices over 10 acres, that'd be for the safe section, or small pollinator plots. If you're looking into general, if you would be in a conservation priority area, that might be the route for you. If you have no hydric soils, or if you have whole fields under 10 acres and highly erodible land, that would be probably the route for you. You can weigh your options and be mindful of the future. Multiple practices can be enrolled during a single sign-up. So you can pick different practices that you think would be good for different fields on your farm and create more of a comprehensive plan during this sign-up period. Illinois CREP is an opportunity that the public has. If you were interested in signing up in CREP, it can be a little tricky to understand, but if you talk to our staff, we'll be able to walk you through it, but hopefully I can do a good job here. You need to have a minimum of 3 acres to be able to sign up for Illinois CREP, but you have to be located within the Illinois River watershed or the Kaskaskia River watershed, which is located on that picture on the left side or on the right side of the screen. So if you're in that priority area, you can sign up for this, and you can sign up for a continuous CREP contract, which is a 15-year contract. And after that 15-year contract is up, when you sign up for the 15-year CRP CREP contract, you have to also sign up for or agree to a 15-year permanent grant of conservation right and easement, which is either another 15-year easement or a permanent conservation easement after your original 15-year contract is up. However, with CREP, there is a lot of incentives, which I'll get into on the next slide, but there's also no cap on soil rental rates. So if your soils are really good in those areas, there's no cap like traditional CRP, and you'll be getting your weighted soil rental rate for Illinois CREP. And the practices, I want to make sure I got those. There's various practices that you can do on Illinois CREP, and you can do CP2 permanent native grasses, CP3A hardwood plantings, CP4D permanent wildlife habitat, CP9 shallow water areas, food plots, CP12, CP21 filter strips, CP22 riparian buffers, CP23s wetlands, and CP25's rare and declining habitats, which we covered in the previous slides, but there's a lot of opportunities with Illinois CREP. They're just mostly water quality based. With Illinois CREP, there's a lot of different incentives to signing up. So you also, in addition to the rental rate that you would be receiving, there's also a Illinois CREP incentive payment, which is $25 per acre. There's also a sign-up incentive payment of $32.50 or 32.5%. There is a PIP, which is a practice incentive payment of 10%. And the participants usually or actually will receive a 10% PIP on the eligible practices for Illinois CREP. And they'll also receive 50% cost share from federal funding sources and also 50% cost share from the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, in addition to that practice incentive payment. So your cost to establish your practice on Illinois CREP is actually 110%. So it's getting totally covered. And then you're also receiving a payment for all of the establishment costs that you accrued when installing these practices. Sign up flow for CRP. So the way that a new producer usually comes into the office looking to sign up for CRP is to get them to FSA between now and June 6th. If you talk to the FSA, there might be additional paperwork you might need to start up if it's your first time. You might have to get you a track number and a farm number, but a lot of the times if you have had farms in the past or if you're recently purchased a property, your farm will already have one. They might give you a new one anyway. Offer your land pick. So you pick your practices and your mid-contract management and your seeding diversity with FSA, and the NRCS that does your conservation plan might also call you to confirm all of the practices and mid-contract managements that you would want to do during that 10-year contract period. The FSA will also do rental rate and draw up your offer and when they get your signature. So you'll be knowing what you get paid annually upfront before you sign the paperwork. Then the offer goes to NRCS for contract documents, maps, job sheets, standards, contract cost share rates computed, and then it gives a document called the 1155, which is your timeline, your schedule of when your practices that you signed up for are going to be completed, and then it'll have a dollar amount assigned to those as well. Your NRCS personnel will walk you through this document and be able to help you understand what you're signing up for and what practices you'll be needing to do during this contract period. And finally, once you get that contract revision with that NRCS or partner, excuse me, or partner, they'll take a signature to agree to the contract, and then it'll be sent back to FSA for confirmation. And then you will be obligated after that to implement your practices and enjoy the rewards of CRP on your land. All the seedings and supplies work are reimbursed 50%, but are not eligible after October 1st. So make sure to keep your receipts. Years 4, 5, and 6 are the mid-contract management periods. So that is when all of those practices we talked about earlier, like strip spraying or burning or interseeding, are to be done during your contract period. And then also to maintain your practices and watch for invasives, and fire and chemical applications will be your best tool. Absolutely. If you're planning to establish a prairie on your farm, fire and chemical are the best modes of managing that, especially for keeping out invasives in most cases. But if you have any questions on that kind of stuff, feel free to reach out to our staff or the NRCS office, and we'll be able to walk you through if you have any specific issues on your farm and how to address those issues. Also, there is no more annual mowing. So as Preston was talking about, the recreational mowing, but annual mowing to keep down random species or just to keep it looking nice is no longer allowed, but you can do spot mowing in certain sections if you have okay from the office to get rid of a specific invasive species or something like that. Same as spot spraying, which you can use to control other invasive species. We are always there to help you guys also, so we're always just a phone call away. We have a map that will be on the next slide to be able to show you guys your coverage, all of our staff's coverage areas. Absolutely call us. We love coming out and we love scheduling a site visit with you guys to be able to go over your farm and and talk about ways to improve your land or ways that CRP or other methods can help you. Even if you don't have CRP, we love coming out just to take a look of how to have you reach your goals. Producers with a large operation and wondering how to be more profitable. Our precision ag specialist, Dallas Glazik, is always there to help as well. He is way better versed than I am about the all of the ways that you can utilize all that precision ag on your farm to be able to raise your bottom line and help with the getting conservation in those high sensitive areas. And also, if you need help utilizing fire as a management tool, we have prescribed fire coordinators in North and Southern Illinois. They'll be able to help you whenever you need it. Our partnering agencies, we partner with FSA and all of those partnering agencies, and yep, NRCS, USDA, Soil and Water, and obviously the DNR as well. And so if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop it into the Q&A section. And I believe Casty has other words as well. Thank you guys.
All right, thank you again to our Farm Bill biologists. The floor is now open for any questions. And you guys can go ahead and utilize that Q&A feature there. All right, I think we're gonna go ahead and wrap things up. Thank you again to everyone who hopped on tonight. And again, we will send a recording of the presentation to your email that you provided when you registered for the webinar. Looks like we did just have one more question pop through. All right, just for time's sake, if you do have any other questions that come up, please reach out to your local Farm Bill biologist. They would be happy to help you with any additional questions. Thank you all again and have a great night.